Welcome, viewers and listeners, and thank you for joining us again here on The Level Set. I'm here with Larry Fields, attorney extraordinaire, Dr. Charles Alexander's in Chicago, and Gerald Christmas, also known as the world-famous Charles Parker, has joined us on time today to engage us in a discussion on some current events that have been forefront for the national media and now for us. I want to go straight to Buffalo, Gerald Christmas. Racist takes a trip hundreds of miles to murder Black people and does so. His manifesto is evident in all of his social media. He's very clear about his intent. I want to kill Black people. I see Black people as the enemy. That whole replacement theory BS underlay what he had to say about what he did. Now, you say the prosecutor has made some kind of a public statement that you have a position on, and I really would like to hear it. So what's up with that, Gerald Christmas?
What I didn't like, I was on NPR Reddit, and I was listening to the prosecutor comment on the case. And what I didn't like is that, I expect for a prosecutor to be aggressive, especially in a situation like this.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing the prosecutor make comments like he's not moved, by public perception. The prosecutor indicated that this defendant is innocent until proven guilty. The prosecutor indicated that this is not a slam dunk case. And those are defense attorney remarks. That's not the type of remarks you expect to hear from a prosecutor. There's nothing more slam. The statements that he was making were not necessarily false statements. They were just not statements you would expect to hear from a prosecutor. Those were statements you would expect to hear from a defense attorney.
Right.
This is a slam dunk case.
Yeah, it
first
is.
Of all.
Yeah,
There's nothing more slam dunk than this case. He came in heavily armed with military-style weapon and gunned down 10 people. It's all on the store cameras.
Oh, it's on his own camera. He filmed himself committing these murders.
What I'm saying, not only is it on his own camera, it's also on the store cameras. Yeah. And the other fact is this, because I didn't know this. I was talking to Ben Crump this morning, who informed me that he went back and shot these people in the head to make sure they were dead. So some of these people may have survived the initial shooting if he had not went back and shot them in the head. So he's a monster.
And the prosecutor doesn't think this is a slam dunk case.
And the problem is that it's this white supremacy that's running through all the veins of our culture and all our institutions. And you never know where it's gonna bubble up. It's like I was listening to Muhammad Ali, and he said, if I got 10,000 snakes coming at me and 1,000 of them are good, I'm gonna close the door on all 10,000 because I can't open the door to differentiate which of those 1,000 snakes are good. I gotta close the door on all of them. And that's the point that we are at right now. Yeah. Because this is not a situation where we can sit back and just ride the line. We got to stand strong on this because these are people that are going out intentionally to execute us. And he's not mentally ill.
No.
Just because you commit a heinous, violent crime does not make you mentally ill. Yeah. And I'm not buying this at all, that all mentally ill people commit these type of violent acts, because that's just not true. Really, the overwhelming majority of mentally ill people don't commit violent acts like this.
Right.
And he had been at the store earlier in March, casing this joint out.
Premeditation.
He was also looking at other targets, a possible church, a possible McDonald's. So he's not mentally ill. He's fully capable and understanding what he's doing and the act that he's intentionally carrying out. So there's no question about whether or not he's competent to understand what was going on. Not at all.
Talk
I'm
about it.
not buying any
Yeah.
of that. And I'm questioning whether or not even this prosecutor should be the one on this case with the type of statements that he's making.
Yeah, I haven't seen who that prosecutor is. But again, to your point, man, you can have clearer evidence of intent and evidence, unfortunately, in the aftermath of his successful execution of the plan that he laid out carefully over time. He talked about this for a long time in advance. Apparently, in his social media, he was saying, I'm going to do this. I am planning to do these things, and here's why, and here's who I'm going to do it to. So to your point, man, I don't, and I'm going to come to Dr. Alexander, because I agree with you, Gerald. His cold calculating, pre-planned murders don't, to me as a layperson, reflect mental issues at all. It reflects someone with evil intent who had the capacity to carry it out. But Dr. Alexander, you've seen, I'm sure, over the arc of your career, many times relative to criminal justice utility for mental health defenses. The claim that my client was, mentally incapacitated or mentally unstable or otherwise mentally affected to the point where we shouldn't hold him fully responsible for what he did. Can you weigh in on maybe your assessment with the information that you already have about that person's mental state?
Yes. And I think this is an awesome conversation. I think we have to process it a couple of different ways. So if this person, and I believe he is, a psychopath, then that's mentally ill, right? Now, and if we go to the world of Bobby Wright, what we have is a white supremacist psychopathic personality, right? And so, and so I do believe that to be, I believe those things to kind of coexist. And so I think it's reasonable that we could say, from a perspective that this person is mentally ill. If you're a psychopath, that is a personality disorder, and that is a mental illness. Now, that does not mean that you don't know right from wrong, right? And so, and I think a lot of times what happens in these situations is that we blend some terms. And so one of the terms that we often blend in these types of situations is, sanity versus insanity. And sanity is more a legal term than it is a mental health term. And it simply means, knowing the difference between right and wrong. I absolutely think he knows the difference between right and wrong. So I do not believe that he's insane. I do believe that he probably meets the diagnostic criteria for a psychopathic personality. Now, I don't know that, I don't know that in and of itself, weighs in his favor. Because again, he knows the difference between right and wrong. And that's, as Attorney Chris played out, he not only does he know the difference between right and wrong, it's very clear that he planned, this was a strategy that he executed.
And Dr. Alexander, if I could just add, if you would comment on this, he did shoot a white person by accident and apologize to that person. So that goes to show that he's clearly, he's very clear. And Reddick, if you could comment on how was he taken alive, first of all, when he's armed like that and shooting these individuals?
At the discretion of the officers.
Let me ask you real quick, Reddick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we leave the middle piece, because that is a big question, and we need to have a full session on that. And I want to throw this out to both Gerald and Dr. Alexander, and you too, Reddick. With respect to the crime of murder, malice aforethought was mens rea. Is that correct?
Okay, say it again.
So say it again. Malice aforethought is the actual act of doing something malicious,
right?
With the mindset, the prior mindset.
Yes, he had plenty of that.
And mens rea is the understanding. of what you're doing. With
Yeah.
that criteria is what I need to understand whether or not this was a murder or not.
With that foundation that you just laid out, clearly it's cold-blooded murder.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
With clear premeditation. Clear premeditation.
Yeah. And I think, again, I think in the mental health space, I think the problem because is that, sanity versus, insanity has taken, such, a prominent place in popular culture, and people misappropriate, the meaning and the phrase and what have you. And really that's more of a legal piece. He does know the difference between right or wrong. And he did execute intentional behavior. So this isn't a situation where this was a psychotic act. He was not in touch with reality, and this just happened. He wasn't deluded. This was all intentional behavior.
Right.
He planned the acts, and so I don't, so you brothers have a much better sense in terms of the likelihood of them being able to, sway a jury in that space. But at the end of the day, it's very clear that all his behaviors were intentional behaviors, and this was not a situation where his reality testing was questionable. This was a situation in which he had been planning for, months, weeks, days, or what have you. He had multiple sites that were potential targets. He had specific targets, and to Attorney Christmas' point, when he killed the white folks, he apologized.
Yeah.
So it's very clear that this was thoughtful behavior.
Thoughtful, Dr. Alexander, let me show you the level at which it was thoughtful and how carefully planned and well thought out, unfortunately, it was. He's interviewed post crime, and his thinking was at the level of, he said, I wanted to do it in this way because I knew the outrage that it would create and the response that it was going to create. And I know that it's going to prompt legislators and others to take as bold an action as they're capable of taking, which in turn will prompt my camp to respond even more aggressively. He wants the reaction to him to be a provocation to his base. That's how well thought out.
Back to your other question. It might have been Larry's question. So we also can take from his statement that there was a sense of martyrdom.
Yeah.
He did not plan to be taken alive.
Right.
Right. So if he were martyred, that even incites his base
even more.
Right. And so
Larry,
all of these things that we have to take into consideration when we look at how we got to this point, and this is all intentional behavior. He can absolutely still be mentally ill, but his mental illness is racist. He's a psychopath. He's a sociopath. He does not care about the rights of other folks, period.
Right. And to Larry's question,
more specifically, Black folks. That is his stated position.
And to Larry's question relative to how could the police not kill this guy? Dylan Roof, Kyle Rittenhouse, not this goofy bastard. It's at the discretion of the officers. They make the choice in the moment. And you can see we have enough here to have a pattern that, hey, no matter how many people you murdered in cold blood and the fact that you're still armed after murdering these folks, we have the capacity to take you into custody without harm and even in a protective posture in some cases where we'll put a bulletproof vest on you, buy you a hamburger, whatever. That's all at the discretion of the officers that respond to that scene. Any one of those officers might have made a decision. This cat still poses a threat and we need to get him out of here. Now, he apparently dropped his weapon or something.
I think we need to be mindful of, Red, is that, like even here more recently, there was, a ranking police officer that got shot by a brother here. after, I mean, the brother shot several people, and one of those people was a ranking white police officer, and they took that brother into custody.
Oh,
And so I think that we'll probably find that there are, you know, X number of situations, you know, that occur in which, you know, brothers are being taken into taken
yeah.
into custody. I just think we need to be, I mean, and I'm only saying that to say, I think we need to be very precise in our commentary with regard to that. We need to be able to make sure that when we make that a point, that, you know, we can do that with the appropriate the appropriate statistical analysis that shows the proportionality and disproportionality as opposed to just saying it.
Right. And I agree. But what I'll say is this: I haven't done the research statistically yet, but I could almost guarantee you, Doc, and not even including those cases that involve murders, mass murders, but the number of times that we've seen evidence for armed white folks confronting police, taking shots at police, and being taken in custody versus the time we've seen unarmed Black folks being killed by police. I would render a guess that statistically, if we were going to be precise and did our research, would bear out the assertion that there's a real difference.
And my point in that is just simply that we know that all of this is going to, at some level, get argued in the court of public opinion.
Right.
And so all they're going to say is, well, what happened to the guy in Chicago? They're not going to say that that's the only guy that happened for, right? They're going to say they didn't kill him.
Oh.
You know, and so then you get distracted, right? And so that's what I'm saying is that when we make this argument, we just need to be precise in our argument and be able to establish the disproportionality of the circumstance and then let that, you know, win the day, as opposed to it, you know, kind of deteriorating into some kind of emotional, you know, argument and dispute.
Right. And let me throw this out there, Gerald. I'm gonna come to you, but I'm gonna stay with you, Doc, for 1 second, because you made an interesting point relative to sociopaths and psychopaths. Those are mentally ill folks. Racism, in some respects, is a manifestation of mental illness. So, in effect, we are dealing with a huge segment of folks in this country who are mentally ill.
Yes.
And specifically when I'm talking about racism, though, mentally ill. Yeah. And Gerald, what I wanted to ask you is, what's your gut telling you, man, on this case, even with the tentative posture of that prosecutor and some of the mitigating statements he was making as if he were a defense attorney? I mean, do you see any possibility whatsoever that this guy is going to beat a case where he plans publicly to do this, does it publicly, and then, you know, pleads not guilty? Do you see any chance that he's going to find a decision like that from a jury?
Well, it's always possible. You know, we live in a land of white supremacy, so you can never rule that out. And you can tell by the language of the prosecutors, the treatment that he got from the police, and even some of the support that he's receiving now, that's always a possibility. And so that's why we have to stay vigilant, and we have to stay organized, and we have to stay on top of this. We have to push. You know, we can't just sit back and hope that the system is going to do the right thing. We have to be engaged to make sure that he gets the punishment, the ultimate punishment that he deserves. I don't think they have the death penalty in New York, and I'm not even an advocate of the death penalty, so I have to stay with my positions. I just honestly thought he would never have been taken alive. So in light of everything that he did, and you know, he was the same age as Michael Brown, and I just look at the difference in the way that he is being treated
and described
after what he did, the way that he is being treated and the way that he is being characterized.
Associated Press says
as an 18-year-old, as an 18-year-old student, as
And
opposed
teenager.
to, an 18-year-old teenager,
Yeah,
as opposed to Michael Brown being this 18-year-old superhuman.
man. Yeah,
This man that supposedly did a strong arm or robbery. Now, strong arm robbery ain't killed nobody, ain't killed no one. And
But
the
saying that
officer,
this is worse than cigarillos?
right.
nowhere
Yeah,
near, nowhere near. And then the officer who killed Michael Brown indicated he didn't even know anything about cigarillos. So
right,
Michael Brown got killed for just walking in the middle of the street.
right.
Nothing to do with anything with cigarillos or a strong arm robbery. And this is and this guy is being classified as an 18-year-old student after he shot and killed these 10 people and went back and shot them in the head afterwards
The
to make
Associated Press,
sure they were dead.
the Associated Press
I
tried
don't
to
see
come
no
out.
mentally illness in that.
Right. The Associated Press tried to come out and correct themselves because they were the ones who were pointed out for doing that, and how they had characterized Michael Brown as an 18-year-old man versus characterizing this man's murder as an 18-year-old teenager. They course corrected themselves. But Larry feels the irony of
The
us.
damage is done already.
Yeah.
What you gonna correct it yourself? Michael
Well,
Brown is
right.
dead.
I'm
You
not
know, the
saying it
damage-
was worth anything. I'm just pointing out that they got called to the carpet for it and tried to take some kind of action. It didn't amount to anything. The damage is done, as you said. Yeah. But Larry feels the fact that we are discussing this on the birthday of Malcolm X, weigh in on your thoughts, man, as we reflect, as we always do, about our collective mission and the direction we are going right now. Here we are, in America still, to Dr. Alexander's point, much of what we see has been static from the inception of this republic, unchanged. Weigh in, man, just on your thoughts and feelings on that.
Well, this is Malcolm X's birthday, and it's also my late sister's birthday as well. So,
rest in
when I
peace.
read Malcolm X's autobiography, I couldn't wait to tell her that she shared the birthday of Malcolm X, and I remember that day. But I think, because you see, I have my hand up, and the question that I wanted to pose to you, brilliant scholars and practitioners and sacrificers that I'm honored to be amongst, is where do we go? Because we keep having these episodes that challenge us acutely. We refuse to acknowledge that we're being warred upon and that this violence is just one valve that's being used.
Yeah.
And I mean this physical violence, because anytime you deny a person a mortgage that will decrease their monthly outlay for housing to $1,200 a month, but at the same time you will give them an apartment that and they're responsible for $3,500 a month for the apartment, and you'll give them a car, but you won't give them housing. Anytime that we still have a medical apartheid system that if we don't have an advocate in, we will lose every single time. These are, anytime you saddle all of our babies with student loan debts so they can't buy houses, these are all violent acts. Anytime you refuse to pay all of us what we're worth, and our white male counterparts are getting that and time and a half compared to what we're getting, that's a violent act. So this physical violence is the cleanup work. Yeah. With all of that, the question I would ask, because I can tell you that Malcolm would not be pleased, neither would Martin. Yeah. And Malcolm would the plan that he had and stood upon was self-reliance. But we continue to want to be integrated into a society that has shown us that at best the relationship with us, because capitalism at its core is transactional. Capitalism doesn't recognize any individuals, it only recognizes positions. But at its core, we're tolerated. What do we need to be doing?
Larry, you laid out a case so beautifully right there, because that's one of my major frustrations in the realm that I operate in when people come at me with, what about black on black crime? What about this violence? You just laid out some, not all, of the violence that really takes more lives from us than even the gun violence that we see on our streets. And it's even more than that. What I say right now, with the level of awareness that I have personally, with all that is happening around us, is at minimum. When you ask me what do we do, at minimum, you need to be, or I need to be, we need to be at a state of preparedness for anything, man, for anything to happen. When we look at what's happening legislatively, when we look at the elections around the country, for example, in Pennsylvania, which we were going to talk about, with a radical Republican who has vowed that the Electoral College will belong to them should he be elected. Ain't no more elections. We say we win every time, no matter what the vote looks like. To the calls for armed insurrection, Madison Cawthorn, the little goofy bastard, just lost his race down there. Now he's calling just for open, forget the politics, let's just do it. I say awareness has to be raised to the point where we are at least prepared, whether that's getting your arms together, your ammunition together, your property situation together, whatever it is you need to do for whatever is coming next, because you can't know with certainty that what we've known in terms of this status quo, where there's laws ostensibly and some structure ostensibly to society, regardless of what our place has been in it, it may open up in any direction at any point in time, and we need to be prepared for that. And I think enough of our people don't understand that.
But I think also, Reddick, we have to keep pushing, we have to keep organizing, we have to keep energizing our people, and we have to keep fighting, because we're fighting two battles. We're fighting inside the house, and we also are fighting in the yard, because true, he did kill 10 people in Buffalo, but on that same day, we attempted to kill 13 people here in the city amongst us. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
We had 13 shootings, which resulted in 5 deaths. But we easily could have killed 13 of our own, along with him killing 10 of us. So we cannot not be conscientious of that also. So we're, the struggle, the struggle continues, and we've never been in a time period. We talked about this before.
Hold on, Doc, let him finish.
We've never been in a time period where we have not been in a fight. And what we know from history is that when we're in a fight, we come out stronger than when we're not. The tough times build stronger Black people. These soft times build weaker. And so we just have to be conscientious of the time that we in and be ready to act as a result of the circumstances of the time that we're in.
Right. Go ahead, Doc.
2 things. The last part that you said is actually kind of a paraphrase of a Malcolm quote, that adversity, to some extent, he spoke to the benefits of adversity and building, building strong people. But what I was saying is that even when we look at the violence, we have to look at the violence in the context of the onslaught of white supremacy. And so we not just randomly, so the thing is, we think that we are randomly just killing each other. When in reality, folks are killing each other because we live in segregated, depressed, and oppressed circumstances that make folks feel and live life in very desperate circumstances. And so they do what they got to do to get whatever they think they can get, because this system is predicated on having. So if you have a system that is on the one hand predicated on having, and then hell bent on you not having, then you do what you could do. And if you're segregated, you act out on the people who you are near. And you commit crimes against the people who you are near, just like white folks commit crimes against the people that they are near.
Right. Crime is an activity of proximity. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, not that we don't need to work on it, we absolutely need to address it, but we need to look at it within the context of the framework, the systemic framework in which it occurs.
Right.
And
I agree.
Oftentimes, we don't do that.
But let me say this, because I agree with both points. And the challenge in that then, Dr. Alexander, becomes our ability to raise the level of awareness in our own community of the forces that are acting on us and creating these circumstances. We have to educate. One of the things we used to do is go into the schools all the time, and it was a successful effort, man. We would talk to our young people about exactly that, about exactly the external realities that they were not aware of yet, but was affecting their choices and actions. And we would just raise that level of awareness, and we were creating young leaders in that space, but it's got to be done en masse. And that's always been our challenge.
Yes.
Yeah. I wish that could be a curriculum.
Well, I mean, that's why we're going to level set. And so today, it's also the birthday of Lorraine Hansberry. And I just want to read a quote. Negroes must concern themselves with every single means of struggle, legal, illegal, passive, active, violent, and nonviolent. They must harass, debate, petition, boycott, sing hymns, pray on steps, and shoot from their windows when the racists come cruising through their communities. The acceptance of our condition is the only form of extremism which discredits us before our children.
She called acceptance a form of extremism. That's powerful, man. Extremism in the negative, acceptance.
And so this is what it was, this is what it is, and this is probably what it's going to be. We have to continue to resist. And to your point, that we got to go into those schools. We got to go into all of these spaces and teach and enlighten. And help people to level set. Right. This very thing that we do every Thursday is to level set and have people understand what the appropriate point of reference is. And so, because that's where we're wrong. So where we get off is that we have arbitrary points of reference. So we say stuff like, back in the day, it was good. No, the hell it wasn't. That's why we celebrate Malcolm's birthday. If it was good back in the day, Malcolm would have came and gone. We would never the difference. The reason why we celebrate Malcolm, the reason why we celebrate Lorraine Hansberry, the reason why we celebrate, so today is also the anniversary of the establishment of the last poets who were celebrating Malcolm's birthday, what would have been Malcolm's 43rd birthday, I believe, just a couple of years, a year after, might not have been a year. It was a month. It was a month after the death of Dr. King. And so if it was all good, we wouldn't celebrate Malcolm, we wouldn't celebrate Martin, we wouldn't celebrate Lorraine Hansberry. There would be no good times because she wouldn't have wrote Raisin in the Sun. And we wouldn't have the last poets, because to the attorney's point, to Gerald's point, it's always been this. And so we gotta rise to the occasion and fight this battle now and teach, that next generation how to do the same. Because this is
Dr. Alexander, could you comment on how we are so, how we celebrate Martin's birthday, but we don't celebrate Malcolm's birthday?
The co-option, brother. Co-option. Great question. So white folks that swooped in, they swooped down and took Dr. King, right? And they used Dr. King for their own devices, right? And so
because they didn't even give it to Dr. King.
Dr. Alexander and Gerald, I'm gonna have to ask us to continue that. Let's pick that discussion up on the other side of the break because we've reached the break mark. But I definitely want to pick this up because that's something we want to hear about. Come on back, everybody, to the Level Set. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Level Set here on Mix 99.5 FM, the heart and soul of St. Louis. I'm with Larry Fields, Dr. Charles Alexander, and Gerald Christmas. On the other side of the break, the question was posed, Gerald, I believe you asked, why don't we celebrate the birthday anniversary of Malcolm X the way we celebrate for Dr. King? And it's a legitimate question, and you all were having some discussion about it. And I want to re-enter that discussion. I believe you and Dr. Alexander were talking.
What I was saying is that, as Larry always says, you know, we have curated Negroes who have been taught to act a certain way according to the white population. And, you know, we have been taught to celebrate Dr. King based on this "I Have a Dream" speech, which was not even the theme of the speech. He never even named the speech "I Have a Dream." He only went into that because Mahalia hollered from the bleachers, "Tell them about your dream." The text of that speech was about check insufficient funds. America has wrote us a bounce check, and we came to DC to get our funds, but they don't even want to talk about that. You know, they watered Dr. King down tremendously. If you think about his last speech, "I've been to the mountaintop," the night before he was assassinated, he's talking about how we need to boycott these companies, how other people need to feel the pain other than the sanitation workers, how you need to take your money out of the white banks and put them in the black banks, how you need to support the black insurance companies. You know, we never hear that part about Dr. King. It's always about this dream part of Dr. King. And then they don't even want to touch Malcolm at all. They don't even want to touch him. And when you think about Malcolm's speech, the ballot and the bullet, that's where we are right now. Like he said, you know, Malcolm said we can swing any election because the whites are pretty much evenly separated. It takes our votes. We can swing it any way, but we have to have the courage to do that. It's like what Mike said, and he's not on here today. We have the players, but they just don't have the courage to do it. So they don't even want to discuss Malcolm at all.
Yeah, that's why they work so hard to suppress the vote. And the other aspect of Dr. King's life that is rarely discussed is the fact that he was reviled while he was alive, man. He was a hated man in this country. They deify him now and put him on a pedestal, but while he lived, they hated his guts.
And the preachers hated him. The letter from the Birmingham jail is about the criticism that he was getting from the clergy. And I remember my mother telling me, because my mother marched with Dr. King. I remember my mother telling me, my great aunts, my grandmother's sisters was telling her, don't go down there fooling with Dr. King. The white folks ain't gonna never let y'all in the front of the theater and all this other stuff. People don't understand. He was vilified. He was vilified. They were not behind. That's why Harry Belafonte had to pay for his funeral. He didn't have any money. He had all those kids, all that notoriety, and he died without any, they couldn't even bury him. They didn't have the money to bury him. Harry Belafonte had to come in and pay for his funeral.
Think of that, man. Think of that. And Larry and Dr. Alexander, Gerald Christmas on this show, The Level Set. Larry, you brought it up over the break. I'm getting ready to bring it up again now. In response to the question, why don't we celebrate Malcolm's birthday the way that we celebrate Dr. King's birthday? I know at least amongst the four of us, I believe we have a collective agreement. Larry, you launched it, I agree. You will never work another May 19th. I will never work another May 19th. Gerald Christmas, not another May 19th. Dr. Charles Alexander, not another May 19th. From this day forward, I say, collectively, across the board, across the country, in this region, and west to east, none of us should work that day ever again.
Can I just say, Greg?
Jump in there, jump in, Doc.
I work on Dr. King's birthday. and I'm probably gonna work on Malcolm's birthday, but I work for the people.
Okay,
And so
I got you. I got you.
if we are doing what needs to be done, then
That's the exception.
Yeah.
That's the legitimate exception. Yeah,
That
I'm
is
with
the
that.
exception. You always got to try and breach something, man. I'm trying to. Now, next year, Malcolm's birthday gonna fall on a Friday. I was gonna make it a long weekend for everybody, and we were gonna do. But you can work for you can work for the people from anywhere. But no, you're 100% right as always, Doc.
But Attorney Christmas' point with regard to the I Have a Dream speech, I mean, that's it was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was an economic march. Right? And so that when we look at that whole thing, we really, really get a sense of how, to paraphrase Malcolm, I mean, we've been hoodwinked. We don't understand Dr. King because we rely on white folks to tell us who Dr. King is. So we argue and we get mad about who is and who ain't in textbooks. But when folks get in textbooks, it's inaccurate. So what difference does it make? And so our job is to make sure that the information is correct. And so first and foremost, that was a march for jobs and freedom. It did not start as some idea by Dr. King. It started A. Philip Randolph in the 40s, pushing up on Roosevelt, telling them, we don't make some changes, we gonna march on Washington, and Roosevelt relented. And then they got to this point, and it came up again, same kind of piece, which is why, A. Philip Randolph and Barrett Rustin are really like the organizers for the event. And Mahalia Jackson knew about, the dream because he had done that. That's a riff. That's just an end of the speech riff. That's all it is.
That's the night before.
Yes, he had done that several times before. He had done it at the march in Detroit. And that might be where she heard it, because they were, close friends and confidants, he might have said that to her otherwise. And so she knew what that was, and then she said, tell him about that dream. And to the attorney's point, he goes into that. But most folks, most of us, not white folks, most of us haven't listened to the first 20 to 25 minutes of the speech to understand that the speech is about that check mark insufficient funds.
Right.
And so we have to bear the responsibility for that. Now, I think another part other than the more obvious, and so the more obvious piece is, you have to figure that it's somewhat more easy for, so when folks are picking, I mean, they were picking sides when both brothers were alive, and people, they picked Dr. King as opposed to Malcolm when they were alive, right? And so it's reasonable to believe that, some of that has to do, with whatever folks think about Christians versus Muslims and blah, 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 blah. And what we know about the nation, is really kind of comes from, what was that? The hate produced, right? So even in the title, it tells you that the rise of the Black Muslim movement is in response to white hatred. What people focus on, white folks in particular, was that the Black Muslims were allegedly espousing hate. Okay, so that gets to be that. But the other thing that I think we have to also pay attention to is that during the 70s and into the early 80s, I don't think that we were fighting. I don't think that whoever we call Black leadership were fighting for a Malcolm birthday in the same way that they were fighting for a Martin birthday.
Not at all.
So white folks didn't just give Martin a birthday, a national holiday. That came with protests and legislation and advocacy and da 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 da. And so I think we have to look at ourselves and hold ourselves like 50% responsible.
Right. But Dr. Alexander, I agree. But the beauty of the sentiment, though, is exactly that, because I think we're at a point now, we make this point repeatedly on our show, we no longer many of us no longer seek the validation and the authorization of white folks to do anything we want to do. We can make that decision internally now, if we wanted to. And everybody just do what we gonna do on May 19th, whatever it is. If you decide to work for the people or you decide to stay away from your job, whatever, that's on us. We don't need it to be sanctioned officially. We can just do it. Yeah.
We get to decide who our heroes are, right?
Yeah.
And part of the problem, one of the problems that oppressed people have is that they continue to look to the oppressor to tell them who their heroes are.
Exactly.
And that point right there leads me to the statement I'm about to make right now. As we're getting closer to the end, gentlemen, I want to know, what should we be doing knowing that we're up against people that have watched the 50-year plan manifest with the taking of the federal courts? How should we be planning? How should we be moving?
To Gerald's point, the response that I would offer up initially, it's not the full response, but continue to organize, continue to work in those spaces that are going to mitigate the damage that has been done through a 50-year plan, and then start developing our own damn 50-year plan. Why will you fight today? Have a long view on what this situation should be going forward as the demographics change, as we become more aware of our circumstances. It's our time in turn to put together a 50, 100-year plan for what it's going to look like for our great-grandkids.
You read it. What's that look like when we're collectively trying to organize? What are the groups we should be relying on? How do we do that? How do we move as families? How do we move as individuals?
I think it starts grassroots. And, there's some organizations that have infrastructure but don't have the same spirit as you may find in the grassroots, in the aware grassroots for what we need to be doing. I think you start with the people, man. The people know what's best for them in the communities that they live in. And then you start trying to put those pieces together, bring some communities together, bring some like-minded organizations with the capacity to move with the people together. And you got to find some good leadership in legislative and lawmaking spaces. We have some, not enough, but continue to push in those spaces and organize around that so that you can use the system that currently exists to build the new system that we want to see come into being.
What do you think, Dr. Alexander?
I think that, and I think we have to continue to do things like this and encourage people to do the same. And again, we have to borrow, to paraphrase, Charles Hamilton Houston, is one fight on many fronts.
Yeah.
And so we're vulnerable to splintering. And we have to understand that this is one fight on many fronts, and one of those fronts is in this political space. And it shouldn't be lost on us that some of our ambivalence about this political space has to do with lynchings. So you got a legacy of lynchings and mass murders because you're trying to exercise the franchise. At some point, that certainly creates a trauma response, right? And so I think that we have to understand that is a part of it. It's not just, just random indifference. It's that things happen when we try to exercise the franchise. And so we have to do that. We have to educate in this space too. So we have to educate about voting and who to vote for and why. And we also have to educate about why we don't vote.
Let me ask you this. I understand that for the people that were living through the lynching period and actually came across that and saw the people being lynched, but right now, these people don't know anything. They not engaged and they don't know nothing about lynch.
Brother, it's called epigenetics. It's called epigenetics. And so we talking about transgenerational trauma. And so many people weren't alive when Malcolm was assassinated, when Medgar was assassinated, when Emmett Till was assassinated, when Dr. King was assassinated. But we know just the same that if you assert yourself, white folks will kill you. So that's transgenerational trauma.
And that's the truth. We do know that.
We just gotta, you know, we have to have those conversations. And I'm not saying that, you know, there's no value for your statement, because yes, we do have some folks who have just checked out. But even those folks who have checked out, a lot of times I believe is because they are misinformed. Because people will, you know, because we got another class of folks, you know, who even look like us, who say, you know, that the vote doesn't matter. And that's just patently false. I mean, that's really all we got. And so with, you know, we can continue to demonstrate. We have to have, you know, we have to have our demonstrations. We have to have, you know, activists, but we also have to have political activists, and voting is activism, and educating the people is being an activist. That's activism. And so we have to continue to do those things to bring the people along.
And
On
I'm
that
going to
note,
add to that. I'm going to add
yeah.
to that. I think we need to do the exact opposite of what we see this capitalistic society doing. We need to challenge every single thing that we thought we knew, starting with our God. We need to challenge who the chosen people are. We need to challenge the children of Abraham. We need to challenge everything that we know about anything that's been taught to us, about us. Everything needs to be challenged because we have been hoodwinked. We have been, and that statement, hoodwinked, bamboozled, run amok, summarizes,
Led
astray, summarizes the miseducation of the Negro in the United States. That's what we, in my opinion, that's what we need to do.
Which is why we come here every week to set the level. Level set is what we do.
White supremacists don't tell the truth.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And what we don't understand is that the whole damn system is white supremacist.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
On that note, we're going to have to wrap. We went a little bit over. Thank you for staying with us here on the Level Set. We'll see you next week. Come on back and let's talk some more.